Hi, I'm Dr. Joanne Smith.
And I'm Dr. Corinna Hankins.
And this is a pod full of pediatrics. And this is the one where we talk about the Hib vaccine.
And a few little myth buster things.
Of course. This is the last time we're going to talk about a vaccine by itself.
It's
our last vaccine.
It's our last vaccine. We made it through all of the childhood vaccination schedule. It's taken us almost a year.
Yeah, it has taken us a year. We started this a year ago.
But we've gone through all of the different types of vaccines in the schedule, which is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and we've actually kind of enjoyed it more than we thought we would because we've learned a lot about the history of the vaccine, right? We knew about the actual vaccine and we kind of knew about the disease, but it was cool to learn why we got a vaccine.
Yeah, just how that vaccine really came to be. It's really cool, actually.
And how it changed over time.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So this last one is the Hib vaccine, and Hib stands for Haemophilus Influenzae type B.
Yeah, and it is a bacteria that caused severe infections in people around the world. And there are several different types, but the strain labeled B is actually really the most aggressive, most virulent form.
And H flu is what we call it for short, and it's spread from person to person through airborne droplets or by direct contact with respiratory secretions from an infected person.
Humans are really the only known reservoir for Haemophilus influenza, and the nasopharynx, which means your nose and your area right behind your nose, is the most common site for the bacteria to enter and then become colonized and cause problems.
And the problem is not when it stays in the nose, it's when it goes beyond to become invasive disease. And invasive disease in H flu is really when it goes beyond the respiratory tract is when it causes problems. So the ones that were the most common were meningitis, bacteremia, which is in your bloodstream, epiglottitis.
Which epiglottitis was... I've seen this. You haven't, but yeah. I saw this once in my career, kind of when I was in training, and it's basically where the epiglottis is kind of the thing that folds over your vocal cord area and really stops food and other things from getting into your trachea. And it's small. It's actually not that
Just a little
big.
flap of skin,
it's
right?
It's a flap. But in this particularly H flu, it infects that or kind of invades that area and causes a ton of inflammation. And all of a sudden you have a really big flap that actually you can't get to the trachea from it. So kids can't breathe. They're really miserable. They often, again, it's systemic, so they're having fever. They feel horrible, and they're in this position where they're trying to get air into through their trachea, and they are awful. And the worst part about this for doctors is that you can't lay these kids down. If you lay these kids down, it actually closes completely, and they won't be able to breathe at all. And it is really hard to intubate them, meaning to put a little
a tube in there to breathe for them,
because we can't get to it.
You can't. And so this is from my perspective. This is what our attendees would talk about, because it was when we started residency. It was when the first time we had not seen epiglottitis, and they're like, tell us these stories about what would happen. People would show up, and you could not help these kids. And you couldn't help them breathe.
And so it was absolutely horrible. Unfortunately, there are other things that H flu causes too. And the thing about H flu is that we can't treat it. It actually is we have a medicine for it that actually treats H flu. We've talked a lot about other vaccines that we don't have medicines or anything to treat it. We have something to treat H flu.
We have antibiotics and steroids help when you have H flu infection.
The problem is for epiglottitis, it happens so fast that the medicines won't help before they can't breathe. But your other ones, like your even meningitis or your meningitis is again infection around the meninges or around the brain. Your bacteremia is infection in the bloodstream. It can cause bony infection, skin infection, heart infection,
pericarditis, and endocarditis.
And we can treat those. We have a medicine, but the medicine itself, actually not that good. No. It causes hearing loss is a common side effect of usage of that medicine. It will clear it, but it doesn't necessarily do that without complications.
And that was early in my career. I had a patient with H flu meningitis, and he was partially vaccinated. He just hadn't got to the age where he could get all the vaccines yet. And he came to my clinic because he was just super sleepy, and mom really couldn't get him awake, and he was a toddler.
Fever. He had
no fever, and we were really worried he'd got into something, that he had had a toxin exposure. But as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, we need more evaluation. I sent him to the emergency room, which was about 10 minutes from our office. By the time he got there, he had a high fever. He had a spinal tab where he had pus coming out of his spinal fluid, and he was ended up having to be in the ICU intubated. And he actually had a terrible ear infection that I didn't even see. It wasn't even there when I saw him in my office. 10 minutes later, it had burst his eardrum and made infection in his brain. And that's just how fast the H flu can have. So even though that kid got antibiotics, and he ended up doing fine, but he did have hearing loss from that whole, from the infection as well as the antibiotics. It just comes so fast, and that's terrifying.
Yeah. And so protection against invasive H. flu or Hib typically occurs by producing antibodies to the type B capsule or polysaccharide. So this bacteria is actually wrapped in a specific type of protein and it has a specific shape to it. And we actually develop antibodies to that shape. And newborns are actually protected initially by maternal antibodies. Unfortunately, those are all gone by 6 months and have started to wane by 3 months.
So yeah, invasive Hib really showed up about age 3 months. And really they were high risk to about 3 years old.
Yeah. So it is terrifying to parents, but this is actually terrifying to pediatricians. I really hope I never have to see another case of this. Yeah. It was one of the worst things I've ever had to see. And it was just, you felt so helpless, and everything happened so fast. It was just really tough.
So this is why a vaccine was developed, and in the early 90s is when they developed this. And we quickly saw the amount of Hib go down, right?
It was pretty amazing, actually.
Because kind of globally, this vaccine was accepted pretty much between the early 2000s.
Yeah, 2000 to 2015, the estimated number of worldwide cases of severe Hib disease in children less than 5 declined from greater than 8 million a year.
Yeah.
8 million
a year
to 340,000 a year. And then the estimated Hib-related deaths in that 15-year period declined from 331,000 a year to less than 30,000. And that was in that 15-year period worldwide, where we're trying to get it to every place around the world.
And in the U.S., the incidence of invasive disease in children less than 5 in that time period declined from about 20 cases per 100,000 in the pre-vaccine area to less than 0.25 cases per 100,000 by 2012.
And then by 2018, 0.08 cases per 100,000.
Which is why we weren't seeing it.
Which is why we weren't seeing anymore.
Right.
And this is really because we made it part of the vaccine schedule. Again, so we took a really horrible disease for the United States, and because we made it part of that vaccine schedule, we saw a decline all over very quickly, and that's really the benefit of that. We call it community immunity.
Yes, we do. So H. flu was discovered in 1892 during an influenza outbreak. And they blamed the H. flu for the outbreak, which is why it was called that. But it actually was not influenza. It's a different thing. So it's very confusing. It has the same name. The first vaccine for H. flu, or Hib, was licensed in 1985. And that was like we talked about, a polysaccharide vaccine, which don't work great in kids.
Yeah. So, and that was actually changed fairly quickly to a conjugated form in 1987. The conjugated form basically just means, again, that it has a piece of bacteria connected to a carrier protein that helps us remember it more. Yeah, so increases the memory response for that.
And kids under 2 who are the highest risk for Hib really needed that. So
yeah.
Their immune systems could be like, yes, I know what to do.
Yeah. And then that was in 1987 that they had that first Hib conjugated vaccine. It uses diphtheria toxoid as the carrier protein. But there have been others since that, and they all work pretty as effectively as one another. But interestingly, the initial ones weren't given to kids under 18 months, but we still saw it decline just because of the community immunity from, a lot of times these were being given by older kids or even adults, like these infections.
Yeah.
Right? So once we started seeing a lot more people vaccinated, all of it declined.
So as we have talked about previously, the vaccine side effects are pretty minimal. Pain maybe at the site, little redness at the site, fussiness, low-grade fever.
And low-grade fever, I always think of as less than 102 and less than 2 days.
Right.
So you won't see high fevers with this. And most kids don't get a fever with it, but you can have one. And it is definitely worth that to prevent this really devastating infection.
And we often find that Hib is a vaccine that parents tend to skip because they haven't really heard the disease and they don't think it's relevant anymore. But as we said previously, vaccines are a victim of their own success. You haven't heard of this disease because we've prevented it so well.
And that's why it is so important to just keep your vaccine rates up. We will see a recurrence of Hib if we don't keep our vaccine rates. That is just a given. It still exists in the environment. It is not gone completely, and it will come back if we stop vaccinating for it. So it is really important. Hib is a great vaccine, really safe, and it can help keep your kid healthy. It does kind of bring up again what we're going to talk about, kind of some of the myths.
And this is one of those things of like natural immunity is better than vaccine-induced immunity.
That is not true.
It's not true. And, and a lot of things in our society today, we've kind of making this dichotomy, theirs versus ours, his versus hers. That's not how really life is, right?
Right.
Things are a continuum. There are some things that are a little better, a little worse, but it's not like always absolutes on both sides.
And one of the things that's a little bit frustrating is that we get this like natural, whether that be natural immunity or even natural foods are always better than like not natural. So there's two things that make me a little frustrated by that. One is that that again, not always true, right? In the sense of natural immunity has a lot of side effects to it, especially for diseases, and can lead to a lot of morbidity, meaning like bad complications.
Chickenpox. You get chickenpox, you're more likely to get shingles. If you get the vaccine, you're really not likely to get shingles.
That's right. And that's a long-term effect, but you're even like from chickenpox more likely to get pneumonia, more likely to get hearing loss. All of those things are more common. And like chickenpox in adolescents, more likely to get scarring from it, right? So all of those things are natural. That is part of the natural disease phenomenon. When we do the vaccine, which again was based on nature, we took a part of the natural virus and just made it not cause problems, but made our body remember it. We don't get all of those things. So it is based on nature, and that's so much of medicine. So much of medicine is based on nature.
Right. I mean, the ideas typically come from science using nature for its best parts, right?
Right.
Because we talk about death is natural, poison is natural, right? I mean, there's just a part of the circle of life, and we, from the scientific standpoint, are trying to be like, let's use the best of nature and avoid the worst parts.
That's right. And we see this. I always love aspirin as that kind of one kind of thing with it is that, aspirin's from willow bark, right? It's willow bark tree. They used to make willow bark tea out of the willow bark tree bark, and it was great at reducing fever in that situation. It had a lot of other gunk in it, right? Yes. And didn't taste that great. We had lots of other stuff in that bark that wasn't just the stuff that we needed to get the aspirin out, right? But a really great scientist kind of looked in that and said, what part of this is actually what's helping fever?
Us, yeah.
And they just isolated that part. And when they isolated that part, we can treat fever without having all of those other chemicals and other things in it. It is the best part of nature that we're identifying and using to treat these infections. And that's what vaccines
So we don't use aspirin for fever in kids. We'll just clarify that.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, we do not do that in kids. It's actually Tylenol, which is very safe in children, and ibuprofen after 6 months of age. There are reasons why we don't use aspirin, and it actually was like Rye syndrome, which we talked about in the chickenpox.
Right there.
Yeah.
But it is a good example of using nature in a positive way.
Yeah.
We're not saying natural is not better or worse. It's just you look at it with a objective view.
That's right. I mean, vegetables are definitely healthier than junk food. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yes. We are not arguing that. We would much, like our whole nutrition episode last time was a lot focused on vegetables, fruit, that type of thing. Absolutely. But just because it has a label of natural does not mean it is inherently better.
Right.
And in fact, it's one of those things that now a lot of things get natural labels. And because they aren't actually FDA approved, they aren't really researched well, a lot of times they can actually have pretty significant side effects.
Yeah, and kind of we talk about, not getting FDA approval because they haven't been studied. And it's not because the pharmaceutical companies would just ignore them. If they thought it was a product that could stand the rigor of testing, they would absolutely be on board for that, right? It's because things, when you look at them in a big scale study, they're probably not safe enough for everybody.
That's right. And that's I actually find one of those really, truthfully, the supplement market is massive, right?
It is.
Billions of dollars. Most of those supplements have not been well studied.
Especially in kids, which is our
especially
focus,
in kids, right? And it's because a lot of them cost money to study, right? And when we can sell you without actually doing all of that research and without doing that and have you buy them, why would we want to do all of that research, right? Well, that's actually not what medicine does. Medicine's we're not going to try to sell you something unless we know that it's going to be safe and effective. And so that's really what that's what kind of we have done. And so one of the things they did, which when we were in residency, is they had all of these cough medicines. They still do all this cough medicine, kind of given to kids, right? Hey, let's stop your kid cough.
Because kids do cough a lot. Right?
They do when they're sick, and there's good reason for them to cough,
they're
which
clearing
we talked
their airways,
about
right?
in our other podcasts. But it can be really annoying to parents and really painful to children, and parents don't want to have their kid feel pain, so they often ask us for cough medicines. There have been really big, huge, rigorous studies that show that cough medicines in children do not work.
No.
And in fact, some of the even natural parts that they were the natural part of the cough medicine could be dangerous to kids in specific times.
Right.
And so they do not recommend cough medicine in children. We do recommend honey over age 1. And that is great, and it can be normal honey.
Yeah, just straight out honey.
You don't have to buy the thing that costs more.
But cough medicines can have ingredients in there which suppress the kid's cough by making them too sleepy, which is a problem for their breathing, right?
So we do not recommend cough medicines for kids, and that was because we studied it. And that's what needs to happen before we recommend any other supplements or other things in children especially. And so that's one of the things we talk about. We also talk about natural, and we talked about a little bit this about nutrition, raw milk, right? Raw milk is considered natural. It is really dangerous for children, unless you are getting it straight from the cow.
The cow that who you know has been cleaned, and you're not putting in the fridge and letting the milk sit there, right? Because that's where the bacteria multiplies.
Right. You don't give it to children. Pasteurization of milk is really safe, very effective, and does not get rid of any of the good vitamins and minerals that you give from milk.
And people say it tastes better to drink raw milk. I'm going to say I have had it. It doesn't taste any different. It's just milk.
Yeah, I think I might have had it actually when I was little and on my grandparents' farm. But again, straight from the cow, which I had to milk. I didn't love it. I gotta tell you. But anyway, if you do it that way, probably going to be fine. If you are not doing it that way, don't give it to your children. And do not buy it ever from any place else. Or even things made from raw milk. There was just a huge cottage cheese outbreak of E. coli from raw milk. So it was raw milk based cottage cheese and has caused a big E. coli infection. So again, we're kind of just talk about those things and the way to really try to keep you safe. That's not saying that nature isn't good. Nature is good.
No, and again, it's not a dichotomy. Do children need vaccines or a healthy diet? Both.
Both of them.
If a vaccine doesn't prevent 100% of infections, it doesn't work. Not true, right? I mean, the vaccines are aimed at decreasing the problems due to the illness, not eliminating the illness for
And
the
we
most
really
part.
we talked about that with influenza and even our COVID one. It's not going to eliminate the illness 100% of the time, but it can make your child have a lot fewer symptoms from it. And I have seen this a ton with influenza this year.
Right.
It was a nasty influenza season.
For sure. Influenza A was
and
bad.
It was really bad this year. And kids who got the vaccine might still have gotten sick like their siblings, but they didn't get as sick. They
And you saw all the
tend
time
to
where they
need-
like vaccinated a couple kids in the family, but they didn't get to the two, and you're like, oh, those are the two that clearly didn't get the vaccine, right? They just so much sicker.
And I had to give them more, like, they had secondary infections. Like, I saw a ton of kids, I actually had to have, like, either go to the hospital or get more antibiotics this year because of secondary infections, which I just don't typically always see with influenza. So, and especially I don't see it when we vaccinate. So, hopefully this information, our last vaccine information, and all of these myth busting have helped you really look at vaccines in a new way. That was our goal, and we hope it helps you keep your child happy, healthy, and safe.
I'm Dr. Joanne Smith.
And I'm Dr. Corinna Hankins.
Thank you for listening.